We are Rogue Media Sports.
There are any number of reasons you might consider selling your home. To move closer to family, live within a smaller budget, or just wanting a change of scenery. Whatever your reasons, having to figure out all the various housing market trends in your area may not be what you signed up for. That's where an agent who is a realtor comes in. Realtors have the expertise to help you find the right price and navigate the process to sell your home in a way that's right for you. That's who we are. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
And it is time for the final episode of the regular season of the Doomsday podcast. And I'm joined here in the Frito Nation Productions by Ed Werder live. Ed's been traveling. I've been traveling. We've been apart for a little while. Ed, it's nice to be back in the same room as you. And I would say the one thing that hasn't changed, things look a lot different when you leave the mountains of Colorado and return to Dallas. But the weather, we are experiencing some frigid weather. And I must say that that pattern on your North Face jacket is beautiful. And I am very pleased to announce that one of my gifts was for a North Face gift card. So I will be going to
Now's a good time. They should have a lot on sale. These thermoball jackets are awesome.
Yeah. So those actually work. They're not just sort of a fashion statement by you. They actually
there's some
retain
practicality
some heat
involved here. Yeah, it'll keep you warm in a way that a lot of jackets won't, and it's damn nice looking and packs up into almost nothing. Is North Face one of our sponsors? I mean, they should be if we're going to talk this long about them.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. I'm happy North Face is with us, and I welcome them to the show. They will be with us.
Quite a surprise to them.
The rest of the year. And Ed, Operation 9 and 7 comes through. You heard it from Jerry. It was very, very important to get to 9 and 7.
And that was the last thing we've heard from Jerry, right? He didn't talk after the game. But he suggested, like you're saying, that 9 and 7 was important to somebody. And I guess in the next day or so, we'll find out exactly who that was important to.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting that he said that. And then also in the barring from SI's, the apocalypse is upon us section. When Jerry doesn't speak, Ed, you covered him for a lot of years. I've covered him for a lot of years. That is very, very rare. In fact, I would say not even
especially after a win.
Yeah, that's right. You would have thought he would have been out there basking in the glory of that 9-7 season. Ed, that you don't want to read too much into it, but there's got to be something to that because I would say Jerry averages not talking after games once every 2 seasons. Is about the rate he goes. I mean, you remember him doing it a time or two, but there's got to be some explanation for this. And as we tape this on New Year's Day, Happy New Year's to you, by the way, you and Frito. As we tape this,
do we get paid 2.5 times our usual rate? Working on a holiday?
Let's just work on the first thing. But we will see, Ed, what happens on that coaching front. Until then, we need to get into a lot. We got a lot to unpack from this season. Ed, you've brought in a lot of information. I have some news to maybe share with you in terms of some of the rivals, some of the Cowboys rivals and the directions they may be going. Frito, I believe it's time. I would like to ask you to play the music, sir. All right, there it is. Always good to hear Ronnie Foss. And I know, Ed, you've been asked time and time again, who is that singer? Who is that? What is that song? And so we will continue.
I think it's under a Roddy Foss pseudonym on Twitter that I'm asked about this, our theme song.
Who
plays it? Yeah, I think he's cleverly disguising himself and trying to promote his own work.
Yeah, he wouldn't be the first to try that, and I would not be mad at him for doing that. Ed, I want to say thanks to our a lot of our sponsors this year. Bombfell was one of them, as I recall, that's been with us. We've had Harry's Razors. Man, still Harry's Razors right there to the finish. And then D&M Leasing, Ed, and I didn't get that new vehicle to you underneath your Christmas tree.
Or the razors.
But I do want to – the razors are coming, I promise. Got a beautiful box of razors for you and Frito. You can see –
Do we have to share it?
No. Y'all are going to
sharing it would be better than what we have to this point.
Ed, you can come over every morning.
There's plenty.
I'll just stay over.
Y'all can have a little slumber party. Guys, the Easy Lease, I can still probably, if you reach out to us, and I'll tell you how to do it. I know and have lots of friends at D&M Leasing. I don't want to brag, but I can probably still get you a special deal over there. Here's how you do it. Call D&M Leasing today, any local area code, and 35 lease. It's 35 LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. That's any local area code in 35 lease, 35 LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. That Easy Lease makes it so incredibly easy, and that you saw it out there, the Audi Q5, Ed. It's unbelievable. Now, to the Cowboys and to this lost season. It was 9-7. It came to a crashing halt, although on a winning note. Is there a way to lose while winning? If that's the case, I think that's what happened. I mean, that was embarrassing. The Cowboys go out there able to somehow finally get into the end zone and win a game 6-0. But Ed, I didn't sense from Cowboys Twitter and the folks that listen to us right here on the Doomsday podcast much joy in Cowboys land. What was your biggest takeaway? We'll get into sort of the ramifications of what will happen now, but what was your biggest takeaway from what happened on the field yesterday?
Well, pretty interesting that Jason Garrett's team goes on the road and in frigid conditions shuts out the number one NFC playoff seed, and yet you don't have a sense of reassurance about this team going forward, especially on offense. In fact, if anything, I think people come away from that game, the fan base, more concerned than ever about Dak Prescott and the state of this offense than they believed existed when the day began. I mean, he had his 8th game this season with fewer than 200 passing yards, 6-0 against an Eagles team that rested 6 defensive starters for the playoffs. That's the first 6-0 game in the NFL since 2003, and it's the lowest scoring game in Cowboys history. It's the biggest eyesore in the history of the franchise in terms of games won. And so now it creates obviously a lot of questions about Silent Jerry and what must he be thinking? What is going on in his mind about this coaching staff? He's already basically said that Jason Garrett is in no jeopardy. At least that's what he said going into the game. Now, whether he feels differently about the outcome remains to be determined, but I'd be awfully nervous at this point if I'm Scott Linehan or any of the offensive coaches, given what's happened with this team. I mean, 5-4 this year, even when they've had Ezekiel Elliott, and offense for the most part has been a struggle all year long. Largely, I think, forgotten in all of this is we know they played 6 games without Ezekiel Elliott and his suspension, and if I had to point a finger at any one person, he would be the guy, because he flatly didn't do his job, and the circumstances under which that happened were well within his control, and it's his responsibility to be eligible to play if not injured. And he failed the Cowboys in that regard. Beyond that, though, who is Jerry going to hold responsible for this? Well, it's unlikely he's going to hold the general manager responsible, because he hasn't for his entire history as the owner of the franchise. So you have to think that it's going to be the offensive staff, and I could actually see a way that we can discuss further when we go through this point by point, that Rod Marinelli winds up being replaced as well. Although I think Scott Linehan is in a lot more jeopardy, even though Dak Prescott, after the game, wholeheartedly endorsed Linehan's return gave him credit for the player that he is, which would have been more meaningful if he had backed that up with a better season in year 2.
Yeah, I think so. And you're right. It gives you more credibility when you've had like a great. I did like Dak after the game saying, they said, well, it was kind of a roller coaster year. Would you call what you had a sophomore slump? And Dak chose to say, and Ed, this is what I choose to call my last year. He said, I would like to refer to this as a growing season. And I think that's a good way to put it. And hopefully for Dak, he'll be able to come back and use what he went through this season and build on it. But now, I know, Ed, as you've talked to some folks and gathered. And one of the reasons we like to wait till the next morning is because Ed, no man works the phone like Ed Werder. Ed, what have you been able to determine when sort of looking back, not just based on the performance yesterday from Dak Prescott, but some of the folks weighing in on sort of when it went wrong for him this season?
Well, I come away having talked to a lot of people within the organization that they still have a fiercely strong commitment to Dak Prescott, and the ready explanation that they have for his failure in the second half of the season is that they made a forced commitment to play what they called small ball because they found themselves unable to protect Dak Prescott in the absence of left tackle Tyron Smith. And so I think if you look at what's happened to them offensively, and Dak Prescott in particular in the second half of the season, that would make a pretty compelling explanation for what happened and would defend his performance. But I know the offensive coaches felt like they had a lot of big plays that they just couldn't make, that they had to max protect, keep receivers in, couldn't get 5 guys out into routes to create options for their quarterback. They went to this small ball concept, get the ball out quickly and hope for some run after the catch, but their ability to function at a high level just totally disappeared. They felt like in the late stages, the second half of the Ezekiel Elliott suspension, that they made some progress, but the pass protection issue forced them to overcommit to protecting the quarterback, the completion percentage, and I got some statistics to back this all up. I got an actual sheet faxed to me that would demonstrate the difference between Zeke with and without Prescott with and without Tyron Smith.
You still have a fax machine?
I have a fax machine. Maybe it was just a photograph and it was texted over to me. I think that was more likely the way it went. But yeah. They were efficient. They weren't explosive. They had guys open, but they couldn't get the ball off when they tried to get something down the field, and they just felt like, it's hard to score when that's the case, when you can't create a lot of explosive plays. But if you look at it, I think the quarterback performance by any measure once Tyron Smith went out, which he was again yesterday, and then you factor in that Ezekiel Elliott was gone for 6 games, and you look at what Dez Bryant and Jason Witten are right now, and it gets pretty hard to find a way to consistently move the ball and score points.
Yeah, and it is interesting that that whole small ball, what they had to do, and when I wrote for the morning news yesterday, right after the game, that's what I went back to, was that Atlanta game, if indeed Scott Linehan loses his job. I think that's kind of where it all started, and I think Jason bears a lot of responsibility for that. Jason probably will not get fired, but I think that falls under his purview, and I think that was embarrassing. I think to a certain extent he admitted that. What they did to that Chaz Green and what they did to their team in that game and Dak Prescott was about as close as you'll come to coaching malpractice. And
we know Chaz Green hasn't recovered, or he didn't regain their faith because they never put him on the field again.
No.
They did put Dak Prescott on the field again after that, but I'm not sure he was ever the same, really, either.
I think they sent Chaz Green into therapy with that. I mean, I think he's been in the shrink's office like ever since that, and he may end up playing for somebody else and having a decent career, but it's hard for to see. You remember we've brought this up before. Winston Justice, when it happened to him, the old Eagles player, the tackle, He himself wouldn't go back over there to left tackle. He's like, no, don't do that to me again. He gave up 6 or 7 sacks. That was O.C. Umenyiora going crazy in that game. And I would like to look, Ed, and you're the kind of guy that might even know this off the top of your head. I'd love to look and see. I was watching the Falcons yesterday thinking about that game and to see how many sacks that defensive end had the rest of the season. Because I think he had 7, didn't he, in that game? He had at least 6. 6 sacks came against poor Chaz, and they finally got him off the field, and I think there might have been 1 more. I think he ended up with 7 in that game. So
I think he had 6, the Falcons had 8, and 5 of them came against Chaz Green, right? Then they put Byron Bell, who was obviously no answer either. But yeah, you're right, because one of the coaches I talked to said to me the turning point of our season was the Atlanta game when we played well on defense in the first half, even after Sean Lee went out after play 8, and we got sacked 42 times. So that's an exaggeration, obviously, but not much of one. But kind of illustrates the point that, without Tyron Smith, they just were not the same, and the quarterback certainly wasn't the same. And let's just, I mentioned that I was sent some statistics of Dak Prescott's performance with Tyron Smith and without. Interception percentage nearly more than doubled. Touchdowns, 21 with him, 1 without him. Average yards per completion went down nearly 2 yards per completion. His passer rating went from 95.5 to 59.4. And sacks went from 15 to 16. And remember, they played far more games with Tyron Smith than they played without him. So the percentage of sacks went from 4% per attempt to 15% of the time he dropped back to pass, he got sacked. That doesn't count all the times he got pressured and escaped, all the times that he got the ball off and got hit. They did not create a safe environment for their young quarterback. And thus, I think that well explains the setback that he endured in year 2, because it got so bad in the second half of the season, people forgot how prolific he was last year and how well he played before this Atlanta game. Going into the Zeke suspension and the Tyron Smith injury, Dak Prescott had 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. It was a year that was very similar to his rookie season. And so while a lot of people out there question whether he's a franchise quarterback now, and fairly so, I still think that if you look at it, his 2 years, for a year and a half, he's been an exceptional player at the quarterback position.
But it just shows we are captives to the moment in what happened this season and all the pressure that got put on him with Zeke out. What it proved to me was that he just wasn't ready. He was, and the Cowboys knew this to a certain extent, and the people we know in the organization know this, Ed. He was put when he could not have been. Now, he performed, don't get me wrong. I'm a big Dak guy, and I know you are too. But he performed when he had to, but he was put in an incredible situation. When Romo went out and he went in, he had this otherworldly running back. He had by far the best offensive line in the game, and everything went right. I mean, think about it. What huge injuries did they have? Dez had a couple of injuries early, but he seemed to work his way around that. In fact, he may function better when Dez, and that's something we need to talk about, is Dez for sure going to be back next year? But when things went south this year, boy, things really went bad for him. And they're going to have to find a way to turn the tide. Because, listen, I've brought up Colin Kaepernick before, and unfortunately now you can't even discuss Colin Kaepernick, the football player, because there's so much other things that are attached to him. But as a football player, he was an ascending as I want to use a Parcells word, a mercurial player. Boy, Bill used to love to use that, and he used it in the wrong way. But he was a rising star in this league, and then it went south for him, and he never got. Well,
he went to a Super Bowl, and arguably was one throw away from winning the Super Bowl, or one ill-called timeout away from winning the Super Bowl against Joe Flacco and the Ravens down in New Orleans. But
it happened.
But I would say that that's not a good comparison, because I don't think Colin Kaepernick, from talking to people around the league, he never really evolved as a passer. He was always a run-first quarterback. He never learned how to read a defense. He never learned to go through his progressions in the pocket. I mean, he looked at his first read and he took off. That's the way he played the game. That's not Dak Prescott to me. Dak Prescott's a guy who wants to play from the pocket, who only uses his athletic ability on the move when necessary, and even when forced out of the pocket and extending a play, he generally is still looking to throw.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's a very good comparison. And he has a different build than Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick's not a big, thickly muscled guy, but he's a guy who had
comparison.
success.
It's just
You're
a guy
who had success.
was taken off and then plateaued in a big way, and we've seen it with a couple other quarterbacks. But I hope he turns it around. Now, based on your numbers, I mean, it might be as simple as sometimes we can complicate things. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at what you've highlighted right now. It might be as simple as his whole, and this is sort of an indictment of him to a certain extent. Is his future tied to Tyron Smith's health? I mean, Tyron Smith seems like he's been around forever. I think he's only actually 28 years old. But again, when you start having major sort of back, and he had some knee injuries or some knee issues this year, you got to wonder, okay. I would think he has at least 3 seasons left at hopefully a high caliber. But if it's the Cowboys have to think about when you start thinking about, Ed, where you're going to, what you're going to value in terms of free agency and the draft. There's several areas. There's wide receiver who gets separation. There's someday to replace Jason Witten perhaps at tight end. Although I did hear our buddy. Brad Sham yesterday on the radio saying they really like Jarwin. They like Blake Jarwin, so we'll keep our eye on that situation. You got to think about an offensive line, and it seems crazy when you have 3 Pro Bowl guys going to the Pro Bowl in the offensive line. But if it's that huge of a part of your recipe for success, you got to keep drafting in that area.
And you mentioned Dak last year and the great performance he had as a rookie, totally unexpected. And a part of that was having the best offensive line in football, which they didn't have this year. And people forget that they started the season without 2 starters on the offensive line. And then you look at the fact that it took Lael Collins some time to get comfortable at right tackle. Jonathan Cooper was never as good as Ron Leary was the year before at left guard, and then Tyron Smith was in. He probably missed most or all of 5 or 6 games, right, this year. And then you combine that with a bunch of receivers who just don't get any separation. And that's the thing. Talking to some of the offensive people out there yesterday was, hey, we need speed. Nobody respects any of the playmakers that we have. And in truth, he said, our good players, our best players, they played average all year. And I asked about Dak, and it was the same word. It was very average. We had chances for big plays, and he didn't make them. His accuracy is disturbing to me. The way we saw him miss, now it was cold yesterday, and whatever. You got to win football games in all conditions in this league. He threw the ball poorly the second half of the season. Whatever the reasons were, he's got to be more accurate at all times than he has been for the second half of this season. But there are complicating factors that I think we've pointed out fairly well here. And so now it's, what do they do? If you're Jerry, and I think we both know how Jerry is in these situations. You know what? He's doing Jason Garrett a favor not firing him. If you look at what's going on around the league today, nobody gets 7 years and goes to the playoffs twice and doesn't escape the divisional round and is kept around. So the way that Jerry will punish Jason for this.
You can make the argument that Marvin Lewis has.
Well, he appears to be on his way out.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying, in the past, he has been one guy that sort of has that resume. But you're right.
He's the only guy who's been with his team as long as Jason has or longer and accomplished less. He's 0-7 in the playoffs. And Garrett's won 1 playoff game. But the way that Jerry has historically punished a coach in Garrett's position and Garrett himself is he makes it uncomfortable for him. He did that in the past by doing such things as asking him to fire his brother as an assistant on his staff, by forcing Monty Kiffin on him as a defensive coordinator. And so now what does Jerry do to make Jason uncomfortable? He has to decide, is he willing to fire Scott Linehan, who Jason brought in as the guy he trusts? His position was, if you won't let me call the plays, Jerry, then at least let me hire somebody I trust to call the plays. And the person he trusted to do that is Scott Linehan, who nobody had a complaint about Scott Linehan last year calling the plays. And nobody had a problem with Scott Linehan calling the plays halfway through this season, okay? But that's how Jerry makes Jason uncomfortable. So if he decides to make Jason uncomfortable and he fires Scott Linehan, does he bring in somebody who runs a different system and try to create a different environment for Dak Prescott and the other players, knowing that first year in a new offense, going to be hard to play as well as we do with a bunch of guys who know the system very well? Could be another setback for Dak Prescott.
Yeah. We've talked about young quarterbacks who have dealt with a ton of turnover. Anybody that's ever played at Cleveland knows what that's like.
Jay Cutler.
Yeah, and just over
Alex
and over.
Smith.
Yeah, those guys have had to adjust time and time again. That probably wouldn't be good for Dak. That's probably why Dak understands that and went so hard for Linehan. It is hard to imagine a scenario where what's happened this year, Linehan keeps his job. I also wonder if, even though he had 3 guys go to the Pro Bowl, if Frank Pollock, there could be a change there. Any offensive coordinator, a new one, if Jerry truly makes Jason uncomfortable, you're right, it might be bringing in someone that Jason's not even, it's trying something new, and then the guy brings in his own.
And you know who that could be?
Norv.
Well, Norv would be one, but I don't know that Norv's over the fact that he didn't get the job over Wade Phillips.
Yeah.
But he does have a history with the Cowboys, and a good one, and a good relationship before that moment, at least, with Jerry. Obviously, he'd carry the endorsement of a guy like Troy Aikman if Jerry bothered to ask his opinion. But what about Todd Haley? That would make Jason uncomfortable. And Todd Haley's contract is up as the offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Todd Haley will first have interest in trying to become the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, where he coached with Ken Wisenhunt the year they went to the Super Bowl with Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald. This is a guy who makes sense from this standpoint. Will it make Jason uncomfortable to turn the offense over to a guy who was Bill Parcells' protege? Absolutely. But Todd Haley has had great success in Pittsburgh, and they've won when Ben Roethlisberger hasn't played. They've won when Le'Veon Bell's been suspended. They've won when Antonio Brown is out of the lineup. I mean, those are 3 of the best players in the game at their position, and they figure out ways to win despite that, and that would have to be appealing to Jerry.
I think I'm glad you bring it up. Todd's the guy I know really well, and he's a volatile personality. And in fact, I could see a moment in time. I mean, I can remember he and Bill shoving each other on the sideline years ago. I would like to see, sometimes Jason playfully shoves people. Haley's not someone who playfully shoves folks. I've never known, since there's certain guys you wonder if they're going to get a second chance. He had the problem with the Chiefs when he became their head coach if they had too much success right away. Tony Sperano had the same thing. He
won a division championship in Kansas City with Matt Castle as his quarterback.
And then the next year they didn't do it, and it's like
that was really an issue between him and Scott Pioli, the general manager. At the time, and schism.
Well, he has schisms.
Jerry gets along with everybody as the general manager.
Okay. I can think of a few that might wonder about that. But one thing to your point, Ed, he had some issues with Ben Roethlisberger early on, and they worked through that, and Roethlisberger has had some great success, especially numbers-wise, with Todd Haley, and I feel like Ben Roethlisberger probably would tell you that it's helped kind of extend his career and give him kind of a second wind having this offensive coordinator.
Anytime a guy who comes in from outside the organization and has play calling authority like Haley did going to Pittsburgh, it's going to make everybody there uncomfortable to have to change systems. And Ben Roethlisberger was a guy who won 2 Super Bowl rings playing in one system. That's what he was comfortable with. And, his thing was hold on to the ball, run around, make a play. And Haley was always trying to convince him to get the ball out quick So, again, maybe that makes sense for the circumstance we're talking about with Dak. We just talked about how they went small ball by force. Well, now they could do it by choice. And look, Haley's, as a position coach, Haley's position has been wide receiver. Look at the receivers that the Steelers have had, and none of them are drafted in the first, 60 picks?
Yeah, it's remarkable. And it just shows you can get
Martavius Bryant, Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Wallace. I mean, and then he coached great receivers, Anquan Bolden and Larry Fitzgerald in Arizona. I mean, if you want somebody who can call plays and emphasizes getting the ball out quick, who has a history with Jerry, who would carry a big recommendation like Parcells would give him, and then can maybe get something out of Des Bryant or upgrade your receiving position, which is obviously a big need, he makes a lot of sense. Can you get him to take the job? I don't know.
I don't know either. He at least knows Jerry and has an awareness of what this situation would be like. Well, they loved it here. They did, even though there was an incident at McDonald's that we won't get back into right now. That they had a little lawsuit involved. But I will. That would be good for the Doomsday podcast. Todd Haley, you talk about a guy who would want to be a part of Doomsday. That is a guy right there.
But we don't judge these people based on our own selfish needs.
You speak for yourself. Okay, so we've solved that. We got a new offensive coordinator.
Well, I don't know if we do it. I'm not saying that Scott Linehan deserves to be fired.
I'm just saying
I
think something's going to happen, and that seems like the most likely thing. Now,
they've got a bunch of assistants on expiring contracts, and so there's going to be a natural change, and Jerry could certainly allow, attrition to accommodate his desire to make it appear people were accountable and changed out as a result of failure, if he decides that he doesn't want to replace the coordinators. And speaking of coordinators, do we want to get into this now, or did you want to do another ad first?
That's a great point, Ed. And I would say this: I love the segue there, smooth. Frito, let's address that later. Hey, thank you to Harry's, and I tell you, I've used Harry's for several years now. Love that ergonomic handle, and I love the fact that for a guy like me, a very sensitive man with sensitive skin, love the glide, the closeness of the shave. It's been really, really good for me. Great shave at a fair price, and I'm going to go ahead and just tell you that harrys.com/doomsday. Go to that and just put that, and I think some good things are going to happen for you. And I would just say this, Ed, it is as smooth a shave as I've ever had, and I love Harry's, love working with them, and love the I cannot wait to give you and Frito your Christmas gifts.
Apparently you can wait.
No, I'm going to do this. These things, Ed, brought over the German factory with over 100 years of blade making experience to ensure the highest quality. All products are backed by 100% quality guarantee. This free trial set includes weighted ergonomic razor handle, 5 precision-engineered blades with a lubricating strip and a trimmer blade, rich lathering shave gel, and a travel blade cover. Harrys.com/doomsday. Go to it right now. Harrys.com/doomsday. All right, Ed, you were about to get to something that really piqued my interest, and so I don't want to, without further delay, go ahead.
Well, I just wonder. We've talked about the offensive coordinator's job being in jeopardy based on the results of the season, but I think another guy who's going to be scrutinized is Rod Marinelli, the defensive coordinator. While you could certainly argue that he's made DeMarcus Lawrence one of the best young pass rushers in football, he's taken a bunch of draft picks in the secondary this year, and toward the end of the season made a lot of those guys look like they could really be a big part of this team's future as starters, especially Chido Uzie, who's a really impressive guy, and has to remind Rod Marinelli of Cedric Tillman, the Peanut. Invented
Charles Tillman.
Charles Tillman. The Peanut Punch-Out. Thanks for the backup on that. And maybe But I think the big failing of this defense has been that it's all predicated on creating turnovers, and the Cowboys continue to be inconsistent in that regard from year to year. This year has not been a good year in creating turnovers in short fields at a time when the offense could really use that, given some of the injury and suspension issues that they went through in terms of personnel. So the other part of this I think that is interesting and might ultimately determine whether Marinelli stays or goes is how do the Cowboys feel about Matt Eberflus? He's their passing game coordinator. Ben, the linebackers coach, came here with Rob Ryan. Obviously has, based on that, a different philosophy probably than does Rod Marinelli's bend but don't break, force a turnover mentality. He's a guy who's interesting because I think the Cowboys view him as an eventual defensive coordinator here. He is one of the coaches whose contract is expiring, and last year the 49ers asked permission to have him interview to be the defensive coordinator on Kyle Shanahan's new staff, and the Cowboys turned down the request. As a result of that, they then offered Eberflus a multi-year extension, and he declined. He decided to bet on himself, so now he could potentially leverage the Cowboys if they think enough of him, and he has other options. He could leverage the Cowboys potentially into making a change at defensive coordinator if they want to keep him.
Wow. And do you ever want to bet on yourself when you're on a Cowboy staff? And I like the guy. I do, and think he does have a nice future, but Jerry sort of at times embraces chaos, and so that is an interesting situation to be in. Now, do you think I just want to clarify a couple things. Do you think Marinelli is still wants to keep coaching? Do you think there's any chance he would consider walking away, or do you think he would, in a sense, force the Cowboys' hand, like you're either going to have to fire me or I'm not really going to walk away? Where do you think he is right now in his tenure?
I imagine he's still celebrating not only the beginning of 2018, but the incredible end to 2017, which is Hugh Jackson just matched him and had an 0-16 season. So now Rod Marinelli is not the only head coach in the history of pro football or the NFL who's had an 0-16 season. But if the Cowboys do,
it's not like the Dolphins.
I was being a little sarcastic. No, they don't pop the champagne.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, maybe.
When another coach had.
Rod's obviously a very accomplished guy, and been doing it for a very long time. I don't really know what his interest level is in continuing to coach. I've never heard him suggest that he doesn't want to coach, but certainly if the Cowboys got leveraged into making a change by Matt Eberflus's availability and his potential to leave the organization, and they want to keep him, they could certainly use Rod's age and call it a retirement and make it look like this was a mutually cooperative sort of arrangement,
and
which is kind of all the rage in the NFL.
Kiffin-like consultant's role. You know, Kiffin kind of hung around for a little bit. You remember that?
A lot longer than some people wanted him to.
I thought, where is Monty?
He's actually, I think he's with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Monty's some kind of consultant with Jacksonville?
Yeah, I believe that is correct.
I thought he might be with his son out there in Florida. That's quite a program they have going right there. Now, that's interesting, though. Eberflus, we'll keep our eye on that. Ed, all sorts of solid information that we've provided today. I do want to say this, as we always give our perspective on the rest of the division. That name you're starting to hear a lot. I heard it in relation to Jim Caldwell, by the way, out with the Detroit Lions. That's some of the latest news today as we sit here on New Year's Day, and also Black Monday in the NFL is what we've called it over the years. Jim Caldwell out for the Detroit Lions. There's a name, there's a last name, Ed, that you're going to start hearing quite a bit. It's the Panthers defensive coordinator,
Steve Wilks.
Steve Wilks. And that guy has a relationship with the New York Giants. So keep that in mind. That is, when we were talking to Justin Tuck yesterday on the Tuck Rules podcast, that was a name he was really hitting hard.
Because Steve Wilkes is a defensive backs coach with the Carolina Panthers, just promoted this year to defensive coordinator by Ron Rivera to replace Sean McDermott, who left the defensive coordinator position in Carolina to become the head coach of the Buffalo Bills and just got them into the playoffs for the first time in 18 years, I think it is, the longest drought in the NFL.
Thanks to the Bengals.
And Dave Gettleman, obviously, who was fired by the Carolina Panthers, but put together their Super Bowl team of a few years ago, is now the kick-ass general manager of the New York Giants. And he's already benched people and cut people, and you got to love that.
Yeah. I saw somewhere where their yesterday, Ed, of the last 7 first-round picks for the New York Giants, only none of them were on the field. You had to go all the way back to 2009 or 10, whenever JPP came in. He was out there. So that's a team. And listen, I'm a Jerry Reese fan and a friend. I love Jerry, but the things had gotten a little stale there, and so they've changed it with their 66-year-old GM. Hey, it's okay. The age doesn't matter if you can come in there like Dave and change things. But the Giants don't do sort of outside-the-box things, and they're going to do something that fits right with them. The McAdoo thing never seemed like a great fit. It was almost like, hey, let's try. This guy's kind of interesting. And somehow they got sold on him being extremely intelligent, which he probably is.
Well, I think again it was
fit.
Part of that was he was the offensive coordinator under Tom Coughlin, and they didn't want to change the system again on Eli Manning. That late in his career.
But he was an outside guy they had brought in.
From Green Bay, right.
Yeah.
He was on Mike McCarthy's Green Bay staff and implemented the Aaron Rodgers style of offense, but Eli was obviously not Aaron Rodgers in terms of his mobility and his willingness to and ability to get the ball out quickly like Rodgers does. So I think the interesting guy to watch with the Giants, one of them will be Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator with the New England Patriots. With the Patriots now not having a line of succession from 40-year-old Tom Brady to whoever is next, which, these guys thought was going to be Jimmy Garoppolo, who's been traded and been a marvel out in San Francisco his first time he's been a starter for them, and Jacoby Brissett traded to the Indianapolis Colts. McDaniels, I know, talked to Bill Belichick a couple of years ago. It was the year that the Giants made the move to Ben McAdoo and promoted him. Belichick told McDaniels, in his opinion, the Giants was the most attractive job out there because of the ownership stability.
Yeah.
It's a flagship organization in the NFL. They had a quarterback in Eli Manning, who obviously the Patriots would think a lot of because he beat them twice in the Super Bowl, and he's the only guy to do that. So it'll be interesting to see if Josh McDaniels becomes a big candidate for that job.
I think they're going to talk to this week also. They're going to talk to McDaniels, but they're also going to talk to the defensive coordinator. Matt Patricia, the man with the kind of the lengthy hair, likes to wear his cap turned around backwards, and is your friend and the SI writer Jenny Vrentas pointed out he was the one that was, I think, spotted wearing a Roger Goodell, I think it said ass clown.
It was like Roger Goodell with a bozo nose.
A bozo nose,
and the Giants are obviously, like you suggested, a very traditional
t-shirt
type of organization, and John Mara has very close ties to Roger Goodell, so how is he going to view that fashion faux pas?
I would just say this. Name me one great member of the Belichick coaching tree. And you could make an argument that Bill O'Brien has been okay, and if he was out in Houston, he might get another job.
Oh, he would get another job in 2 minutes.
Okay, but I'm just saying that's not been a good tree in terms of head coaching success. There's some great coordinators and that kind of thing, but Charlie Weiss ended up being a disaster at both college and NFL. Cornell's been pretty much a disaster. It's just
Al Groh.
Yeah. In right now, someone that Belichick came off the Parcells tree. Parcells' guys are all over the league to varying amounts of success. But we were just talking about one of them with Haley, and one of them's a coach in the Chargers, and it looks like the Jets are going to stick with Todd Bowles. They are all Sean Payton, obviously. They're all over the league right now. So anyway, you just have to look at that when guys don't have success. And I think you kind of have been a McDaniels fan, and from what I've been able to, I don't like to put words in your mouth.
What he does, yeah.
But for whatever reason, things did not work out for him with the Denver Broncos. So we'll see. He's a young guy. I mean, we all deserve second chances in life.
I can't wait for mine.
This is yours, by the way.
This is mine.
Yeah. Hey, thanks to our sponsors this year, D&M Leasing. Thank you for being a great partner. And as I pulled up today in the old Q5, Ed, oh man,
He's mocking me.
What do you mean? No,
I mean, you rolled up in this D&M leasing.
You've got a beautiful vehicle too.
Yeah, but I paid for mine.
I pay for this one, and I've paid for years with D&M Leasing, but I don't pay a lot. And that's the greatest thing about them. I mean, you save up to 50% when you lease rather than buy. Ed, I'm serious. I think you take great pride. Oh, I own this vehicle. Hey, leasing can be a great thing. Call D&M Leasing today at any local area code and 35 lease. That's 35LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. Mention Doomsday. Mention Doomsday
I'll
to
try
them.
it. I'm going to try
it.
it.
Call D&M today. Any local area code in 35 lease. It's 35LEASE, or visit dmautoleasing.com. My guys over there, Jeff Core and Roger Lee, been wonderful to me over the years, and they'll be wonderful to you, and they'll get that car anywhere to you. You know, we got a lot of people who listen to me because I got a lot of Baylor friends. They don't even have a store in Waco. And for some reason, a bunch of D&M leasing vehicles end up in Waco. They just, hey.
For recruits?
We'll just drive it down. No. I think that would be TCU. They've got more ties to TCU and A&M. But they don't do anything like that, okay? These are above the board folks at D&M Leasing.
Right. That's not what they were accused of. I forgot. It was something much less significant than giving away cars.
Yeah.
That was SMU.
SMU was doing that many, many years ago, and Ed thinks things have changed on the hilltop. Ed, anything else you want to add? I mean, this has been quite a lot of information. And just to sum it up, Ed says Todd Haley, would he possibly be a candidate? I think that's a headline. I think we'll continue to talk about Scott Linehan. I think all the things you brought to the table on Dak Prescott, those are all very important things, and I know a lot of publications around the country will want to kind of listen to this. I'll help them do that and get this out to the multitudes. Anything you want to say? I mean, any sort of New Year's greetings you want to make? Now's your time.
I think the interesting player decisions that the Cowboys are going to have to make this season are the top two guys on their salary cap, Des Bryant and Jason Witten. Two guys who, in the case of Des Bryant, doesn't justify his contract based on, even though he's still a relatively young guy, he has an injury history that suggests, along with his statistical performance, that he's not a game changer, and he's being paid more money and accounting for more cap space than any other player on their roster. And can you afford that when you're trying to re-sign guys like Anthony Hitchens and DeMarcus Lawrence and David Irving, and want to have some flexibility to go out in the market potentially and get other players? And Jason Witten, obviously, a legendary figure in this franchise. Nobody's played more games in a Cowboys uniform than he has, but I think they recognize internally that he really has no speed anymore. They still think he's a good player, and so that probably alone allows him to come back. If he so chooses, and he certainly indicated that even though he's soon to be 36 years old, he wants to continue playing. And it'd be hard for the Cowboys and Jerry to deny him that opportunity to take him on publicly over that issue. But these two players are counting $29 million against the Cowboys cap. They hold the first and second positions on the roster in that regard, and I think it's pretty hard to justify that. And
they've already gone through a situation with Dez. I think they're going to be fine. The $6 million, I think, is what they'll owe Jason Witten. I think they'll, based on all his intangibles, what he brings. I don't ever think he was a speed player to begin with.
Well, he certainly had a lot more run after catch ability than he has now. He's still very reliable, and getting open is it's a nuanced position. He has that unique feel for how to get open. He's still a guy who's respected, but he doesn't do anything after the catch. He can't really run the seam route and so forth like he did early in his career. So they need to develop. I mean, you mentioned a candidate. They need to develop one of these young tight ends to do that, or they need to go acquire one.
Maybe go draft one. Giants that's one good thing that happened to them this year. They seem to find a guy like that
in the first round.
In the first round,
the Cowboys have they try to sign Baylor basketball players like Rico Gathers, and then they never get them on the field.
It's not the worst pick. They got him late, and I think he's got a concussion issue, Ed. I think that was a good pick, and if he can ever get past this, he'll be okay. So
what are his numbers?
You don't
in 2
have
years?
to say the Baylor. Well, he's had some beautiful preseason games, and Ed, it's a concussion deal. Stop that. That's the wrong way to go with this, especially on this.
You either perform or you
don't.
don't. That's the NFL.
Yeah. Oh, okay, Ed. I'm sorry. I forgot how tough you were. Golly, now you've made me forget one thing. Oh, Dez. He's okay. They've already had that one episode with him when they were, things were kind of getting a little ugly when they were going to re-sign him, and he was getting upset. And then there was some stuff that came. You remember
Yeah. He thought they were leaking information about him and his personal life to devalue him as a player.
I'm trying to think who even had all that information. But anyway, moving forward, this could get ugly again if they start trying to get him to take a pay cut, because they already brought that up with him. Hey, Des, what do you think about a pay cut?
The media brought it up, that's the most ridiculous thing ever, to make a big deal out of a guy saying he's not going to take. Why would anybody on earth whose employer hasn't proposed a pay cut volunteer in public that they're willing to take one?
I know.
That's ridiculous. You'd have to be a complete idiot to say, "Oh yeah, sure, I'm willing to stay here for less money," before my employer even broaches the subject with me.
It would have helped me at Cumulus.
Well, I said you have to be an idiot.
And to just go ahead and bring that up. Oh man, Ed, it's been wonderful. Been quite a year, and here we sit here, Frito Nation Productions. We want to thank Frito for being a part of this, and Ed, we're excited. You've got some stuff coming up. You're going to be part of this postseason run, and I believe you will be part of the Super Bowl activities. So I hope that you'll be on the ground, fleshing out some Cowboys information. They'll probably make you focus on the actual teams involved in the Super Bowl, but I hope you'll.
But there could certainly be Cowboy ties if it's the Saints or it's Mike Zimmer's team up in Minnesota.
Wouldn't that be something?
Could be the first home team to play in their own Super Bowl.
Yes, Ed. We will certainly try to put you to work in every conceivable way. I want to thank you. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you, Frito, as we put a bow on a 9-7 Cowboys season. Operation 9-7. They got it, Ed. And as I said via Twitter, Jason Garrett just keeps stacking winning seasons.
First time ever he's had back-to-back winning seasons. How could you possibly consider firing the man?
I would extend him. I would extend him right now and give him about a 5 to 10 year extension. See where you're going to go. That is it for 2017. Happy 2018. Ed, say good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this conversation.
Rack your look for spring at Nordstrom Rack and save up to 60% on brands you love. Rag & Bone, Vince, Marc Jacobs, Adidas, Joe's, and more. Great brands, great prices every day at Nordstrom Rack. Score new dresses, denim, sandals, designer bags, and sunglasses, plus updates for the family and home. Get your spring on for less, up to 60% less, today at your Nordstrom Rack store. What will you find?
There are any number of reasons you might consider selling your home. To move closer to family, live within a smaller budget, or just wanting a change of scenery. Whatever your reasons, having to figure out all the various housing market trends in your area may not be what you signed up for. That's where an agent who is a Realtor comes in. Realtors have the expertise to help you find the right price and navigate the process to sell your home in a way that's right for you. That's who we are. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.